right, welcome Sharon to the show. I appreciate you being on the show with me today.
Well, thanks for having me, Scott. I love talking about purpose and um, inner spark. I like to help people have their inner spark, know what it is.
Well, I think a lot of people are going to benefit today from this show and kind of what you have to say and your experience with just with life itself. So I think what we'll do here is just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and kind of how you started out and kind of how you got to today, like on this show, like kind of how you got, from point A to point B.
Well, of course, it's always a long story, but I was the middle of five. And, actually, as middle children, we often feel invisible.
I do. Yes. I am the middle child as well.
And mine was a little more strategic in that I was there was sexual abuse in our home, and I thank heavens he keeps his hands off me, but there's the whole recovery process that goes with that. And so being invisible, I felt like kind of served me, and until I retired. And then it's not okay to be invisible. And yet there's so many things in life that call for us to be courageous. And my career was pretty much just go to work, be diligent, be responsible, don't rock the boat like at home. And so, and yet the recovery and the being courageous to make decisions that not everybody is courageous about. You probably got some things that you wish you had more courage for, Scott?
Of course. I think everyone has a little bit of things they wish they had more courage to do.
Well, I have become the queen of courage now on Instagram. So I do a 2-3 minute little video, usually weekly now, but I've got 149 of them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I make little art blocks, and I started out by talking about my art blocks and the wisdom that's on them, and it's evolved to being the queen of courage. So
I love that. Excellent. Awesome. So when you talk about being the queen of courage, so I guess, originally, I think what a lot of people struggle with right now, at least in the, the mental sphere, the goals, no matter what your goal is, right? No matter what it is that you want to do, it could be a promotion in your career, it could be a relationship, it could be fitness, nutrition, which is a lot of what we talk about. There's this weird thing that holds us back, and there's this okay, how do I do this? What do I do? And you're nervous, and for some reason people don't take that next step because of fear. Fear is one of the biggest things that holds us back. And I would say, if you agree, courage is the opposite of fear for the most part of my mind. So I guess, how do you go from fearing something to being courageous, to kind of having that mindset?
well, in fact, one of my favorite sayings is worry is a misuse of imagination.
I like that.
So fear is either what's behind you or it could be what's ahead of you too. But Scott, there is a huge, people don't talk about how detrimental comparison is to our well-being. We're always, well, my generation, we had to fit in. And so you had to wear the right jeans or the right haircut or whatever. And yet when our inner spark, which I love talking about, and purpose is all so unique. And if we're comparing ourselves to what will people think or whatever, that is negating what you were born with. Like, I'm not good enough because they're better than me. Well, they're better maybe hiding their insecurity or their acting out to be hotshot or whatever. And it may be something very false and not genuine. And when you have to look yourself in the mirror, at night and feel good about yourself, are you going to feel good about comparing yourself to Tom? hello. The being genuine and authentic is really that you're good enough. There's nothing wrong with you, and you need to focus on what brings you joy and delight, not what Tom or John or whatever is, where they're going. Their path may be very different, and I think a lot of disease, cancer, diabetes, whatever, is maybe because of that, both fear and comparing ourselves to trying to measure up. I have never had cancer or diabetes, never been in the hospital, and I think I look pretty good for 75.
So I guess my question for you would be, and I agree with you. I think 100%, when you compare yourself to others, it's you're only seeing someone at their best, and you might not be at their best at that moment. There's this whole thing out there. If you look at Instagram and you look at everyone's photos, and they always look amazing. They always look so great. And then you're over here like, why am I not enjoying my life like they are? You don't realize that they just took a snapshot of a 1 second part of their day, and it actually doesn't define who they are. But we will compare our worst days to their best. And you're right. It does create this negative mental cycle. In your experience, is there any specific example where you kind of had this negative cycle going on, and then were you able to break it, and kind of how did you mold that?
Well, I guess the biggest negative cycle was around not being affirmed and loved in a healthy, genuine way with my dad. I at one point asked him. By that time I was already in behavioral science master's program, and I remember coming. I think it was a Thanksgiving. In fact, I came home and it says, "We're not close, and it could be this or this or this." I actually gave him some words to justify why we're not close, and he didn't know the answer, and there was end of discussion. And he was a carpenter, and by that time I was probably making more than carpenters were, and maybe it was my education, whatever. But I don't know. I think this is pretty common of women or young ladies wanting to be cherished, by a man, and helping us through life, and having, sharing expenses and joys and all that. And it wasn't until about a year ago that I decided I could cherish myself. That was such a novel thing to me, and yet it feels so good to not be. I'll be happy when somebody cherishes me, because that could be a long day coming. you know
Why do you think that? Because you mentioned this point right before, and I do want to hit the cherish part, but you mentioned that just previously, that like we tend to kind of, we look at other people, we almost don't cherish ourselves. Do you like know why that's kind of part of, at least in the US, I feel like this is so common, where we just don't like ourselves, we don't have confidence. And then obviously, like, is there a reason for that? Are we mentally kind of designed that way, or is it societal, or both? How does that happen?
I think it's the ripple effect of comparing ourselves. That logic can play itself out quite a long time. But getting to your point too, though, about a low point, I remember a few times going to church and giving hugs so I would get hugs, in my recovery work. And one time I definitely felt like I was a tender eggshell. And if anybody came up behind me and said boo, I would wind up on the floor. I was that fragile feeling. But that was working through the, having to love myself, or having to heal myself, because nobody else does that for you. It's definitely a one-man show to be willing to transform what you didn't have for what would be a healthy relationship.
I love that. That's great. And then, so when you say when being cherished, right? Like, when someone else cherishes you, how important is that to find that someone else will cherish you? But and also at the same time, what if you don't cherish yourself? Do you find that if you don't cherish yourself, if you need the validation of others, how can you need that and then also rely on, or is that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that toxic to need that and then look for someone to give you that? Or is that natural? Should we be doing that?
Well, I can't speak to how natural it is. I just think I remember many times thinking, oh, guys have it so easy. They just put a comb through their hair and put a t-shirt on and they're ready to go. And we got to put on the makeup and we got to curl our hair and we got to do all these things to, be accepted, even at just a job. And it's not fair. And of course, they usually make more money than us and they're get promoted more and all that stuff. But um, I have never married and never had kids. And so I have distanced myself somewhat from that gotta have it. I was, and some people are driven to solve that problem. I remember when I was 22, 23 years old, and I had learned to, well, my aunt had started me a ripple Afghan. In fact, I used it on my bed last night because the electricity was out for 9 hours overnight and we got snow here. So my ripple Afghan came into really good use last night. And I was sewing in the process of making that. And Sharon, you should be out there socializing. It's Friday night. You should. And that went on for 2-3 days. And I finally said, shut up. I'm happy with what I'm doing. I like my company, so go bother somebody else. And I've never been challenged with being lonely because I decided I like myself.
How does someone deal with that? I mean, like, don't you, I feel like at least, in my generation specifically, like people don't want to be alone. People are not comfortable being, not going out on a Friday night or just staying home and doing nothing. I feel like a lot of people need that atmosphere or that camaraderie of I have to go out because then I'll be with other people and I won't be alone. So I guess, do you have any tips for people listening to this, or like, yeah, like I do feel lonely, or yeah, like I don't cherish myself. I don't want to be by myself. Do you have any advice for someone kind of going through that and who doesn't feel confident, and how they can kind of reverse the script in their head?
Well, the one thing that comes to mind is I am enough. And the being willing, the courage to really believe that, and not be relying on the culture norms. To me, that's part of being authentic. Is and maybe pretty independent. and I'm in the process of reading a book now about how important relationships are as you get older, that it helps you live longer, but it also that just even the fact that you live longer when you're in good relationships. So I'm going to work on that because it's impressed on me even through Thanksgiving, and our normal process of getting together was shifted because the main chef did a different plan, and so we had to go different places instead of to that one location. So my sisters, but the going against the culture takes an extra amount of courage, and to believe that what your desires are good enough, you're enough, and there's not a problem with you. Why we buy into this comparison of what everybody else is doing, I don't know. I never had the, not brainwashing, but the belief that I would be more valuable and fixed or be complete with a man. Somehow I missed that lesson in life. And I'm kind of glad I did, even though I did have a brother and we were pretty close in age, but we were usually stacking hay together or milking cows or, on a farm. So, and maybe because of the sexual abuse in our home, I separated myself from that, buying into needing the attention and approval and having to build a family that I could take or leave a family. My next younger sister, that's the only thing she wanted was a family, and she's got a lot of drama to prove it.
How does someone, in your opinion, let's say they you tell them, it's easy to say, oh, I'm enough, right? It's easy to kind of have that. You wake up every day, you do the positive affirmations in the mirror, and people do that on a regular basis. But there's still so many people out there who still don't, like, they say it every day, positive, I'm enough, I'm enough. What do you do when that's not enough? When you still have all of this amazing self-doubt on who you are, what you can be, and that and maybe subconsciously, you just don't feel comfortable in your own skin. What would be your advice to someone who doesn't feel enough, even when they know that that's all I gotta do, I am enough, but they just don't act that way and they don't feel that way, even though they know it? How do you kind of get the mind and body to resonate on that same frequency?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, and what I've known from a very young age, probably about 5 or 6 years old, is that God loves me. And love is such a powerful energy. And when he says I'm enough, then that settles it, at least for one person in my life, but I like, well, that kind of, I like to connect with people who've had near-death experiences. And when they've been to heaven and come back, and the messages that they are here to relay to us. In fact, this wall hanging that I have behind me speaks to that very much. You are enough, you are loved, and you always be loved. And that's the spiritual connection, I guess, is what I'm getting at, Scott, is the hope and being curious and being courageous and think of possibilities. I believe there is a DNA code inside of us, and that's what I'm trying to help people find, is that is a subconscious thing to us that I want to bring to people's awareness of how you were made on the inside. There's no garbage when you were created, and to express that and to manifest the potential that is amazing inside you and unique. I get really turned on about uniqueness, and that's where I want so many people to apply their courage, is the courage to be their unique expression.
It's one of those things where I believe the number is, you have a 1 in 400 billion or trillion, I think it's 400 billion chance of being born. And every single person is born an original, but so many people die a copy. And I think those two statements kind of put together exactly what you just said. Like, everyone has this inner spark. Everyone has something about them that is unique, that's different. And yeah, I think from a young age, we are indoctrinated to kind of follow the stream and follow the crowd. And then what that causes is this dilemma of, not having courage and being in self-doubt and not knowing who they are. And so I like to get to the point, you mentioned a little earlier, but kind of mentioned a little earlier, is the, basically, if you don't have purpose, it seems like that is really the kind of if you take everything to its core base, purpose. And I know one of your things, I've looked at some of your stuff, but purpose is the secret glue to a meaningful life. I know you've said that in some of your content, and I'm curious to kind of dive a little deeper into that. So I guess, how do you, I guess, what are your thoughts on everyone having their own specific purpose and finding that?
Well, one of the things, since I research retirees quite a bit, I have been, they often think they don't have purpose in retirement because nobody tells them they need a new purpose. If your job was your purpose, if your education was your purpose, once you leave your job, who are you now?
What's next? Retirement.
Yeah, and they need a new purpose. So oftentimes things like, okay, like my nephew is moved down to Texas, and once he got there, and he was still working on his job that he had left, remotely from Washington State, and when he had to switch from that job to something local, then he found it working for something to do with the Veterans Administration, kind of indirectly, I guess. And he had a chance to, his boss took him on a tour through a VA residence, I guess, and he saw the impact of what he was doing tied to how it was serving these veterans. He was practically in tears by the time he left that little tour, because he realized, he saw the impact of his actions affecting somebody else's life. And I thought, if that's the only reason he moved to Texas, it was so fulfilling to him, because now he saw a connection with what he did, connected to someone's life and making a difference for them. We are so modernized that the impact of what we're doing is so far away from us. We don't see the difference it's making in somebody else's life. But say you're an engineer and you're designing prosthetics for people or dogs. Yeah. I've seen things that people are doing that for dogs now these days. Well, that is much closer to see what you're invested in research is making a difference in someone's life. So when I was doing podcasts here about 4 years ago, one of my guests was a past president of Washington AARP for 6 years. And he did a wonderful presentation on our show with 9 things you get when you volunteer. So maybe you're a young mother and you're working at Walmart or a retail store, and you don't find that much purpose in being a cashier. Well, you might find your purpose instead in some kind of volunteer way, Meals on Wheels, or I deliver senior food from the food bank here on Tuesdays every week. So purposes can often be found in volunteering, and yet don't just take any volunteer job. Try 2 or 3 or 4 to see which one fits and delights you the most, because that having a reason to get out of bed in the morning in service of others is just powerful.
And I love that, because I think it's 100% true. And I think there's again, I don't know the number, but it's I believe it's like when someone retires, if they don't stay active and they don't stay busy, like they're more bound to pass away significantly sooner, because they've lost their purpose. They've worked for 40, 50 years. They lost their purpose. They don't have a reason to get out of bed anymore. Yeah, I mean, there's only so much golf and so much traveling you can do and so much money to spend. I think once that wears out, it's, what is it that you want to do? And I think that discovering that purpose throughout life is kind of part of what we're meant to be doing at this time. And so I think being active makes a lot of sense. I think that, like how you said it, was very, very was a very good way to put it in terms of that. What if someone and this is what struck me. So I want to kind of combine two things that you said earlier that it really just struck me just now was, you want to have this, you want to have courage, right? You want to have courage to be yourself, do yourself, because you're unique. Like, you shouldn't be trying to copy everyone else. Don't be comparing yourself. And then you want to have this purpose. But what if, because of childhood trauma, which we talked about a little bit, and a lot of people have childhood trauma, and it could be, it ranges from a death in the family to sexual abuse to domestic abuse. I mean, there's so many things. And at that point, how can you find purpose in that when something's so bad? I mean, earlier you said that, that, you're with God and everything, but what if someone doesn't feel that way because of all these bad things that have happened to them? How do they overcome something like that and find their purpose?
Well, the things that happen to us, everything is meant to be something we learn from. And it may not be this obvious when you're going through it, but it's usually obvious 2, 3, 4 years down the line. And something that has really served me well in the last 4 or 5 years is to think of people and myself as I'm doing the best I can. Maybe my parents were doing the best they could, and it cuts loose all those judgments and expectations. At the time when I thought of it, it seems like I'm always on a diet, and it made a difference right away with my weight loss scenario. But I've been applying it to people almost daily now, that they're doing the best they know how. And so I did become who I am today by going through that sexual abuse recovery. It's made me stronger. Some like Little League, maybe they've always won. Well, how do they know how to handle loss? If you're always on top, at some point life is going to serve you some losing the game days, and you still need to be able to get out of bed the next morning and say, I'm still enough. I did do the best I could. And I saw in the news just a night or two ago of some high schoolers that were all blind, and they were playing football, and they won the state championship.
What, blind football players? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Where
Yeah.
was that? Do you know where that was?
I don't recall. I saw it on the ABC channel, and they've been doing some series on that team for about a year. It seems like they were someplace in Texas, but to find that many guys, 12 to 18 years old playing football was pretty amazing in itself. But and for them to believe that they were enough to do that, and they could do that, and they showed the world it's possible, even to the point of being state champions.
I love that. I had no idea about that. That's pretty crazy. I'll have to look that up on ABC. So that's pretty amazing. So would you say, or I guess, what would be your, if you had to give a person, who's been through some trauma in their life, is, they're at the 9-to-5 job, maybe they're doing marketing or consulting, or they're doing XYZ. It doesn't really matter what they're doing. And they're looking to, get in better shape. They're looking to advance their career, whatever the goal might be. What would be a piece of advice or two pieces of advice that you would give them based on how you overcame, your childhood trauma, built mental strength, and kind of courage to be yourself? What would you tell them? What are some things that you would want them to take away from this?
Well, it's kind of a cliche that you need to believe in yourself first. And yet my career of 40 years, I didn't have I didn't always have the courage to believe in myself. I did have the mental strength to move from uh, Washington State to Florida for a job that I had courage enough for, but the courage to follow. Well, in fact, once I got there, about a year later, they gave us an incentive to leave, and I took it. That might have been a mistake when there's nobody, there. I wanted to be a consultant. Well, people have to be able to vouch for your smarts
Abilities.
and
Yeah.
reliability and all that, and I didn't have that built down there when I left my steady job. But still, I by that time I had already decided that I refused to live my life based on fear. So that might be a tidbit right there. There's in the Bible, Joshua 1 and 2, chapters 1 and 2 talks about being a good courage, being a great courage. Do not be afraid, be courageous. And I had already grabbed hold of that and decided that that served me well. But let's see, where was I going with that? Your question was
Your best piece of advice for someone who has gone through trauma and just hasn't found their purpose or courage yet. Like how did you get out of the negative headspace that you were in, and how did you turn that around into kind of this positive outlook?
yeah. So the determination. I actually stomped my foot and remembered, that I grabbed hold of that nugget of gold, in Joshua 1 and 2, and it gave me like Joshua, it gave me the courage to rise to the occasion of what life was calling for me. And if you're going to hide under a pillow, you're not going to have courage. But the fact that I was a lifelong learner has made quite a difference in my recovery work, and making it who I am today. But purpose and meaning is a heart thing. And not many of our jobs are connected to our heart. I think the younger generations are starting to grab hold of that and walk away, because there's a real principle about living your life based on values and working from that same set of values. When it doesn't line up, then going off in a tangent in opposite direction is going to frustrate you. It's going to stress you. It's going to disappoint you. But living your life in alignment with your values is critical.
Yeah.
And now where I'm teaching people how to know themselves, what your DNA and spark is on the inside. It's invisible. I'm helping people bring it to their awareness, and then making choices that align with what matters to you. And when so many people are finding the secret to working from anywhere in the world, that takes a lot of courage, but more and more people are doing it every day, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the new thing is to be able to work wherever you want. And if companies don't allow that, you end up going somewhere else, which is great. Yeah, bye. Yeah, it's which it'll be interesting to see, because a lot of people, they're doing what they think they want to do. Is there and you mentioned this, and I want to be respectful of your time. So, but is there a way to know? And it almost sounds like you would know, but I had this issue as well. So when I was in college, my major originally was physical therapy, and I was going to be a physical therapist because my mom kind of pushed it, but also I was interested in it, and I was in physical therapy like 4 times prior to college for multiple injuries. Yeah, nothing horrible, but enough to be there a lot. And I realized I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but there was this feeling that I was just off. I didn't like the classes. It didn't make any sense to me. Yeah, the money was going to be good, but this doesn't make any sense. And then I switched majors. I kind of I can't do this anymore. I switched majors into kinesiology, which is more so fitness, nutrition, all that stuff. And it felt a lot more clear, felt more aligned with what I want to do. So but it almost sounds impossible to say that. Is there a way, in your opinion, to know if your actions are aligned with your purpose or what, or your ideal, situation of what you want to do? Like, is there a way to know that prior to doing that, or do you just have to take the leap and see how it feels? Is it just a feeling, or is there like any way to know that like this is what you should be doing and it aligns properly? Is there a feeling to that?
Well, I have been living that way a lot, especially this last year or two. But um, Scott, there is science now that is connecting your brain and your heart and
Mm-hmm.
your gut.
Yeah.
And when I this is a little bit of a side story, but I was in Dallas, Texas at a Mayfair event that was going on around the Cowboy Stadium. And I found this geometry teacher turned jeweler back in the far corner of the fair. And I love unique stuff, people's uniqueness, but this was unique jewelry. And when I tried on his rings that he had, something moved in my gut. What's going on? I took them off and put them back on again, and I got this sense in my gut that this was something amazing. I left kind of stunned, like, what was that about? But my point, Scott, is that there's times that there's a still small voice that will talk to us when we listen. Maybe it's on vacation and you're watching the ocean, or you're watching a campfire, or maybe a lake or a fall waterfall. And there will be this little voice that, you're calm and cool and collected, and you're just kind of mellowed out, and you'll have this little inspirational thought, and like, where did that come from? Well, I think that's God talking to you, and you're in such a moment that you can hear. And our first inclination might be, oh yeah, go fly a kite.
Mm-hmm.
But it's meant to be honored, paid attention to, and responded to. And yeah, it might take 10 years to make it happen, whatever the inspiration is. I know while I was writing my book and doing my podcast, 3 or 4 times, I just laid on the couch and say, okay, what could be, like, I knew I was looking for a tagline. What could be a good tagline? And I just kind of chilled and rested there. It didn't take long, maybe 10 minutes, and the answer came. And oftentimes, as I'm going to sleep or waking up, ideas will come to me. So it's those delicate moments where, are you listening? Are you honoring it? Are you responding to it? Because if you don't, I think it stops talking to you. Can you make sense of that?
Yeah, no, I mean, that sounds a lot of what I talk about. Just there's this, you have to, I think what you mentioned earlier, being in alignment with yourself, and there's something that is going to push you, because you are an individual. Everyone's unique, everyone's an individual, and there's something unique about you. And so that will push you towards what it is that you may want to do or supposed to do. And a lot of us tend to ignore it because life gets hard, stuff happens, we're negative, we follow wherever the culture environment
Take
takes
care
us.
of myself.
Yeah, instead of taking care of ourselves. And so I think that yeah, if we can take a second to almost self-reflect, I think it's what meditation is great for, is you can take that second, analyze your thoughts, analyze the busy day, how you felt in those moments, and really align yourself with how you're feeling. And then obviously you have to make those actions, and that's what takes the courage, that's what takes the mental strength to take those leaps. Quitting your job, moving across the country, getting out of an abusive relationship, allowing yourself to enter a new relationship, all these different things that we're also afraid of, or compare ourselves to other people, we're so afraid of. If you just take that moment to reflect and then take that leap, I think that that inner voice that you mentioned, like, it definitely does talk, and it tells you, it gives you, I'm not sure if it doesn't speak in English, but it definitely gives you signs and feelings like it did for the jeweler at the Dallas Stadium. So I think that
The
there's always little things.
leap of faith. Yeah. So here's what came as a result of that jeweler
Leap of
display.
faith.
I don't
Yeah.
have the rings yet. I'm still
Mhm.
looking. That's on my dream board, but I am precious jewel of wisdom. I am colorful collaborator, motivator, and learner. I'm tranquil, authentic, and pure inspirer. I light fires. That's my inner spark. And that's what I want to help everybody find.
I love that. I love that. Do you have any final thoughts you want to give before we head out here?
Well, one that this actually had appeared on my work while at work, and it says it so well. It's by Thomas Wolfe, and it's, if one has a talent and cannot use it, one has failed.
Hmm.
So that might be where you're keeping the pillow over your head. If one has a talent and only uses half of it, one has partially failed. Maybe that applies to your job that you don't exactly love. If one has a talent and learns somehow to use the whole of it, they have gloriously succeeded and won a satisfaction and triumph few people ever know. And I think that's where all your energy and focus is, to use the whole of your talent, what was put on the inside, your DNA, your GPS, your soul, spirit. It's a journey well advised.
I love that. I think that is amazingly said, and that was beautiful. So I appreciate that that drop of knowledge, that little gold nugget there. Where can people find you? How can people find you?
Okay, my website is my name, Sharon Rolph, SharonRolph.com. And I'm also on Facebook, the same name. And Queen of Courage, Sharon_Queen of Courage is on Instagram. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well. And I do have a couple of ebooks that are free. One is A Call to Courage, and the other one is directly aimed at retirees, 3 tips to create a new life after retirement. So I'd love to get in touch with you, because this applies to any age. I actually have a friend who has helped preschoolers who tend to act out to know their inner spark too, and it settles them right down.
I love that. And the ebooks are on your website.
Yes, the 3 tips to awaken your inner spark is awaken your inner spark is on SharonRolph.com.
All right, perfect. And all this will be in the show notes, so people can take a look at the links and they can click on those, and they should be able to go right to the website or to connect with Sharon on their own. Sharon, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for the great conversation.
Thanks for your time, Scott. Good job.